In my last video, we spoke about how movement works in Diablo 1 and the basic implementation of the design rules it follows, which I'll link in the description box in case you want to go watch that. In this video, I'll be going over movement bugs, some new things I've started working on, and finish up with some game design. So first things first, let's talk about movement. As you can see, it seemingly follows all of the rules of Diablo 1, however, we've got some bugs. Clicking left mouse button when you want to turn sometimes hangs and doesn't fire immediately. The absolute spaghetti code I wrote for this is definitely the reason, so I'm gonna have to fix that at some point, but to be honest, it's not really that high up on my list of things to do as it doesn't actually break the game or functionality too much yet. The models and animation for the main character are truly just a placeholder. I mean, it is some free low poly model asset I found on my first Google search, so it works purely for testing at this point. Seeing how the game is supposed to be slow and methodical, a character at full sprint really isn't the ideal look. So that being said, I truly don't have an animation controller. I mean, I do, but it's basically as standard and as basic as it gets. It runs, it stops. That's really it. So once I find and craft a character model that I want to use, then I can go back and fix some of the bugs and pathing that occur. Like this one, where the player just kind of runs in place because it's waiting for an animation to play. But we don't have that. Anyways, that's the animation controller, and that can come later. I did manage to add some directional turning, similar to Diablo 1, but again, ignore the beauty that is free attack animations, because it works and that's all that truly matters. Simply hold down shift and left click in any of the 8 directions and the character turns. Wow, amazing. Next up, my first enemy, well, kind of. It's more like just a base class, so it's kind of like a blueprint that every enemy will inherit from. I plugged in the pathfinding that the player uses just to get it to move, created a simple patrol script that just paths whenever I want it to, and made a basic detection system. Currently it only works if it can physically see you within a certain radius of the enemy, but I'm currently working on 3 other methods of detection. Pure distance, so ignoring physical vision limitations. Sound, such as fighting another monster or not sneaking around them, more on that later. And lastly, illuminated vision, so hiding in the darkness to avoid detection. So why am I adding different enemy detection systems? Well, let's talk a little bit about game design. So I'm going to preface this by saying currently, my design choices revolve around the idea that a player has limited resources to heal himself and is in a constant struggle to survive. I mean, not in a ridiculous, over-the-top way, but in a challenging way. Meaning, you won't always be able to just run in and kill literally everything in front of you. There may be certain dungeon levels where a player simply just doesn't have enough health to go into a room where the big boss is. And that could have stemmed from making poor decisions previously in the level. If I'm going to add more challenging enemies, they need to be a little bit more complex. If I add the same kind of detection system for each enemy, it gets too familiar and stale for the player. This allows me to create enemies a player will learn and memorize. There may be different enemies the player should avoid fighting when low on health as well, and if the player simply opts out of learning these things, then they should probably be punished for it. Adding a bit more flair than just movement and detection, there's also how enemies behave. Some charge directly into battle, while others will try to lure you into traps until you're low enough health and then try to kill you. So having more complex and intelligent enemies is an important factor of improving, I think, on the core of Diablo 1. So in order to convey my game design choices with this project, I think it's best summarized in a very short sentence. Your actions as a player determines your future. Later.